Hello, and welcome to Higher Results, where business, workforce, and talent intersect. I'm Melody Reagan, CEO of Eye to Eye Workforce, and your host. And this is part 2 of privacy in the workplace. As we've already discussed, but just to share, privacy has become the hot issue of the 21st century. And believe it or not, privacy affects all things throughout the life cycle of a worker. And for you as an employer, it definitely affects everything throughout the life cycle of a worker. What you can and cannot do when you are recruiting and hiring, to what you can do or not do with your workers, all the way through to how you're protecting the privacy of information for your clients. And with me again is my wonderful friend, Liz Coker, who is COO of 3P Health. Welcome to the show, Liz.
Thank you, Melody. Nice to be back.
Fantastic. And Liz, let's start with just if you would share with everybody a little bit about yourself. And so that you know, Liz has a business where she has patents with regard to privacy. And in part 2 today, we're going to dig in deeper to the digital side.
Okay. Yes, so for those of you who weren't with us last time, our patents are based on what we call a contextual data communication platform. And it is regarding how do we provide the proper context around our digital communications with individuals. And when you do that, you need to collect certain information about the individual to make it personal. But when you do that, you potentially put that person at risk for breaches of privacy or inappropriate use of their data. So as we developed our technology, we found ways to protect the patient, as I say, since I'm in the healthcare space, protect the individual, but also give consumers a choice about how they share their data and then how that data may be used in the future and how it may be shared in the future. So my background comes from product marketing, channel marketing, distribution, manufacturing, and I do a lot of work with startups, advising them on their go-to-market strategies and some privacy best practices.
Fantastic. And by the way, I just want to say I'm so glad you got the dress code today. So we're both in white.
We're both in white.
White hat policies. So we're not going to get blacklisted
There
today.
we go.
All right. So we're going to jump in just a little bit. Why does privacy matter? And let's go a little bit deeper. Why does it matter in a digital world? Why is it so important?
Wow. This shouldn't come as a surprise to most people watching, right? We're both employers, but we're also consumers. And I don't know about anybody else, but I got an email a couple weeks ago saying your password is X. I was part of the Facebook hack. I am no longer on Facebook. I kind of hit my limit on their privacy or lack of privacy management and policy. So right there, when you're not taking care of your data the way you should, when you're not respecting privacy, you can lose customers. So I am one of many millions of people that have signed off of Facebook permanently because of that. So, think about privacy as it relates to protecting your business and how it protects your employees as well.
Exactly. And you know what? One of the things, if you get one of those emails, please know that it is not valid. You can refer it to law enforcement if you choose to. Just so you know, pay attention and change your passwords regularly. They really are trying to get money for nothing. Mm-hmm. Just make sure that you're changing your passwords regularly. That's a little bit of privacy.
In my case, they got my password.
They did.
Exactly correct.
No,
yes.
That's wow.
Yeah.
So whenever you get that, go back through and change everything. Mm-hmm. It's really important whether you love it or not. All right, well, let's jump in.
Sure.
From a digital standpoint, you and I have had conversation around public and private portals. And portals are everywhere, from our website, how we're engaging with clients. We have our intranets for our workers. Mm-hmm. Tell us about privacy and portals.
Okay, so portals by their nature typically require a login. So usually it's a username or email address and a password. So that's just the basic security to get into your portal. Now, the information on every portal can be dramatically different. I've worked on projects with Melody where she's given us access as a contractor to work on her portal, but I don't have access to anything other than what I need for the project on which I'm working, right? Then there are portals such as your health information portal. with your provider where you fall under the HIPAA privacy law, where that data must be kept private. So it's even more restricted, and it really doesn't matter whether or not the administrator of the hospital wants to give me access. They can't. The only person who can see my portal is me and my doctor.
By the way, you mentioned HIPAA. What is HIPAA? Let's define that.
So HIPAA is the Health Information Portability and Privacy Act. So it has two pieces to it. Portability just means that I get access to my data. I can see what's in there. I know what's in there. And I can correct something that's erroneous that is in there, which becomes particularly important when you're in the healthcare space. If you have the wrong medication or the wrong symptom, then doctors might be treating you for the wrong thing. And insurance may deny you something if you haven't tried something. But if you have, and it's just not documented there, right, that can get in the way of making better health decisions. The privacy side is exactly what it sounds like. It's trying to protect that privileged information between a patient and their provider, their doctor. And only then certain information can be passed along to an insurer to ensure that they're billing. So really just like client, attorney confidentiality, you've got the same thing going on in healthcare.
You know, one of the things that I love that you brought up about the portals, we all use electronic tools. And typically when we're thinking about those electronic tools, all we care about is functionality.
Right.
Does it do this? I need to do Gantt charts. Here's how I'm going to engage with this client. Here's how I'm going to engage with this worker. These are things that we're talking about today that affect the collaboration tools that you're using. They also affect your HRIS, your HR information systems. And coming through even with HIPAA and the privacy, it matters for employees that they are keeping individual worker information private. So one of the things when you are looking for these different tools, don't just think about it from functionality, think about it from privacy. Like exactly what you said, we have a collaboration tool that we use, and it allows us all the way down to individual tasks, notebooks, messages. We can choose who sees it and who does not. And what we always do, one of the things I always talk about is relevance.
Yes.
Relevance of information. You know, honestly, we want transparency in our work environment, but make sure some of the information that you're sharing, is it relevant to the people that you're sharing it with? And keeping the information a little more quarantined on relevance reduces your exposure.
Yes, and that's one of the things that we find critically important in healthcare, and particularly when you look at population health, right? Medicare, Medicaid, anywhere the public-private sectors are coming together. When you can make sure that the people administrating a plan only have the information they need to administer that plan, one, it makes it easier for everybody to do their job and find the information they need. But two, you don't run the risk of any privacy breaches. Oftentimes they're just unintentional, but people don't always understand all of the regulations and what the impact is to the company should private data be let out into the open.
Exactly. There's a tremendous amount of exposure with it. All right. So, you know, when you are working from an online perspective, and one of them, we've had the discussion that laws are different, and you got to pay attention to this, state to federal. Many of the laws that affect privacy are federal, but states are actually starting to get into this game with cybersecurity and everything that is going on. So a big thing that happened this year was GDPR.
Right.
What is GDPR and who does it apply to?
So GDPR is the EU's General Data Protection Regulation. And it applies to all EU citizens, all citizens who are in the EU, right? So if you're visiting and you end up, say, at the hospital, or you end up renting a car, it applies to you there. There is still some question about if an EU citizen is here in the US with a service that is specifically designed for US citizens, whether or not it applies. But in healthcare, you have a lot of foreign nationals that are here doing business, particularly larger organizations where they're bringing in the best doctors, the best technologists from other countries that are permanent residents, but they're still citizens of another country. This is where this gray area comes in, and there are very, very strict privacy protections for those individuals as employees or as customers or as patients. And the fines are significant. They're up to 4% of your annual revenue. So that's 4% of your annual revenue. That's one of the toughest fines for anything anywhere in the world.
By the way, though, technically as much as what Liz says is true where they're trying to figure it out, in the United States at a federal level, we have specific laws. GDPR does not specifically apply, even though there is a little bit of ambiguity.
Right.
But one of the things that Liz, when we're talking about this, always says, you have a choice as to what your policies are going to be, and sometimes leaning into them at, that common level where you're just making sure that you're taking care of things. Now, let's back up for a second on GDPR. What GDPR says, say that I have a prospect, a customer, whoever is engaging with me, that they provide their private information. What it says is if they request for me to delete it, I truly need to delete it.
Yes.
It's a really simple thing. The other one is they have the right to make sure that that information stays accurate. Each organization needs to have a data privacy officer.
Yes.
By the way, that's my favorite word of the day.
A data privacy officer.
So you have to have a privacy officer and someone that people can get to in terms of addressing it. Now, what is really fantastic about GDPR for us in America is the fact that it's like if you are on a WordPress website, WordPress went in and updated so that it's inherent in the system. If you use email systems like MailChimp or Constant Contact, they went and they updated so that they are GDPR compliant, and it makes it nice and easy for us as business owners to have that compliance.
Yes. So the one thing that you would look for, particularly if you are doing international business, is that you are considered what legally they would call a data controller. You control the relationship, the agreement with your customers, with your employees. But any service provider that is processing your data, so let's say you use ADP for payroll, or you're using an electronic health record company to process your claims, you need to have a contract with them that says they also understand what the requirements of data processing are. So it behooves you to do a contract review of your service providers that are handling personal information.
By the way, that is a great recommendation. Yeah. It's like what I will tell you, and it is something, again, going back to when you're making decisions, don't just look at it from a functionality perspective, look at it from a privacy perspective, and also what their liability is. And anytime you are collecting information about a person, whether it's their name, their email, their phone number,
their
privacy,
location.
Privacy matters, exactly, relative to marketing. And, the situation that you have is just using smart tools and paying attention to what is happening.
Right. Now, there are a few things that confuse it.
Yeah.
So the same data can be handled different ways. So this may seem a little counterintuitive, but let's say you have a Fitbit and you are on an exercise regime from your doctor, and your doctor wants you to lose some weight. And you use your iPhone and you upload your Fitbit data through your iPhone to your Epic Health record, and then your doctor reviews that. The path that data takes and its final resting place are all protected under Hipaa because it's part of your medical regime that your doctor has recommended for you.
Right.
You take that exact same data that gets sent directly to Fitbit, that gets used to send you your little graphs and your badges and your motivational emails. That data is not protected under HIPAA. So you also need to look at how the data is going to be used to understand what protections need to be put in place. It doesn't mean you can't put them in place for all things, but what needs to be to keep you in compliance.
By the way, if you go to websites or you have services, they all have privacy policies in terms of service. And you, as a business owner, need to make sure that you have appropriate privacy policies. If you are collecting information, that you state that. Now, what's interesting is in the EU, GDPR would apply.
Correct.
But in the United States, GDPR does not apply. It goes to all of our federal acts around what is privacy and what we can and cannot do.
Correct.
Kind of an interesting dynamic. And one of the overrides, by the way, even with GDPR, is there is a provision that balances for business that says if it is too onerous, it's like how much history you have to maintain or what
Correct.
you need to change. Because the other thing is, once something is digital, it actually maintains a digital footprint.
Yes.
There's a reason a lot of companies actually, when they get rid of computers, they destroy them
Yes.
as opposed to repurposing, because there is a digital footprint that is present.
Yes. There is no great way. There is no permanent way to truly delete something
On a computer.
on a computer.
And that,
you
crazy?
can put a bullet in the hard drive, but that's about it.
That's right. So, all right, well, let's talk about the Internet of Things and how that's shaping it. But can we start off with what is the Internet of Things, so we're all in a common framing?
Yeah, so the Internet of Things, the Internet of everything, the Internet of health things. These are devices and sensors that connect back through the Internet to some server somewhere. Right, so this isn't your Fitbit talking to your phone. That's a Bluetooth connection. The Internet of Things are coming into energy sensors, so smart homes. The Internet of Things would be digital pacemakers from a medical device perspective. The Internet of Things are your Samsung refrigerators and new ovens and ranges that have wireless in them that are communicating back to the mothership with information about, you're low on milk or your sensor's about to go, your broiler's about to go, something of that nature. So it's all of these things that are happening in the background, sending information back and forth. Probably some of the original Internet of Things were business security systems.
Yeah.
Right? They started as closed circuit cameras, but quickly a Ring doorbell would be an Internet of Things device that we use at home that would be equivalent to security in a business.
By the way, as we continue to evolve, there's more and more technology coming at us. And this is where a lot of people make the joke of, do I really have any privacy? So if we were to jump in for a second, because we've been talking about this from an employer perspective,
right?
Do we as individuals really have control over our privacy? And what can we do?
Okay, so I'm going to say yes and no.
And that's true for employers too.
It is true for
everything.
Everyone. So first and foremost, we have an expectation and a right to keeping personal things personal. The definition of what personal is depends, right?
Yes.
So it's context, right? As a society, we post some of the most intimate details of our lives on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and things of that nature. And once you post something to a social media public website,
it's public.
Expectation of privacy should be gone, right?
That's right.
It's like being a celebrity. Expectation of privacy is gone. You've made yourself a celebrity. However, when it comes to specific types of information, such as healthcare, such as protecting children, also what would be considered very sensitive information, such as gender affiliation or sexual preference, things of these natures. This is considered very personal information. Those types of things, we still do have a reasonable expectation of privacy if we choose to protect it. And it really comes down to a choice. So you can choose how much privacy you have or not. It's really up to you.
That goes all the way through as an individual. There are things that employers can ask in terms of applications for employment that you might not like. You have a choice.
Right.
You don't have to work for that employer. You don't have to apply for
Correct.
that job. What I can tell you is most employers stay within the boundaries of the law of what they can and cannot ask. If they need a background check, they need to get an employee's permission to do that, right, in terms of information. If they make a decision not to hire based on that information, they have to give the person a period to remediate, check, and make sure that that information is valid. And yes, they can check in terms of, depending on what the role is, they can do criminal backgrounds. They can check your credit. They can check your driver record. But I absolutely, if you've put something out that's at a public level, Well, guess what? It definitely becomes public, and more employers are using that public information.
Yeah, they are. I think that as an employer, when you look at privacy, maybe take it from a different perspective. Look at a culture of respecting individuals' data.
Yes.
Right? So privacy, again, is contextual. People can opt in or out of whatever level of privacy they may want within, the law. You can't opt out of what the law says. But if you build a culture of respect around individual data and choice, chances are you're not going to run afoul of the law because you're getting consent, you're being transparent, and you are regularly communicating what the rules of engagement for your company and your employees are.
That's an interesting thing when I think about consent. Because of consent, who actually has responsibility for consent? Is it the individual or is it the employer? Because they're both, it's a party in terms of the consent.
It is a party. In the healthcare world, consent must be provided, and the individual has to opt in as opposed to opt out. In the consumer world, it's very much about opting out. When you get into health information, when you look at a lot of the employer-related items, you do need to opt in, present people with the form, right? If it's an onboarding form, they have to sign their consent. Again, as you're looking at providers, service providers that might be doing some of your HR automation, make sure that that consent and compliance are part of that, which I'm seeing more and more of those including. Yeah. So again, they can choose not to, right? It's not a click wrap. I can't ever use Google, but if these are your policies, get that consent up front, or they can choose, if they choose not to, then they can choose to find employment elsewhere.
By the way, there are quite a few policies around this that employers as well as businesses need to follow, like can-spam laws. If you don't sign up for the newsletter and give me permission to send to you, I can't. And with GDPR, one of the things that it does require for the EU is opt-in. And you will see more and more opt-in. The other thing, I'm sure you've been visiting sites and you see where they tell people it's about transparency, that this site has cookies and you have to accept the receipt of those cookies, because when you have cookies, it is embedding further into your software and your system, so it's not completely separate. Now, one of the things that you brought up in terms of employees, and I want to go back to this as far as what is common, the way you as an employer maintain your employee information is really, really important. Very common mistakes is that everybody puts everything together. We really do recommend, and actually legally required, your I-9s have to be filed separately. File your medical information on an employee separately. It really does matter. It's, a couple of things, and it actually becomes quite problematic in other ways for employers. We want community. When I always talk about a job, what is a job? It's a way you make money. It is your community, right? And it also is our identity as individuals. One of the first things people ask is, what do you do for a living? Well, because of privacy issues, it actually restricts us as employers with some of the things that we can do. Like, we cannot discuss if somebody, honestly, we can't put it out if somebody's pregnant. We have a policy. If somebody wants to share that they're pregnant, that's up to them. If somebody is going out for surgery, we as employers can't share that. So please understand that that is your private information for your workers, and we allow our workers to share that. So we keep things separate with regard to medical, keep things separate with regard to your I-9, and make sure that you're protecting their private information, whether it's their phone number, their social security number, what their address is, make sure that it's in a secure system. The other thing is, believe it or not, when it comes to being in the military or not, that's something as a privacy. That is something somebody gets to choose to self-identify for or not. So there are things that you might feel, wow, my employer's not being super loving here, but believe it or not, they are respecting the laws and respecting privacy. And I love the perspective. It's about consent, and if we all have that transparency and we share up front, it can go a long way.
Yeah.
Now, I want to ask you before we have to run,
Right.
because we've been talking about digital.
Right.
We could go on and on and
Right.
on. What are some things that an employer or a business can do to make sure that they are, creating that respectful environment and also maintaining appropriate privacy?
Got it. Most companies are pretty good from an HR perspective about their basic compliance. But with digital, there are coming new opportunities. And in particular, I want to mention wellness programs. Wellness programs can bring in a plethora of data. And historically, it's been you fill out a form that said, yes, I didn't smoke, or yes, I walked my 3 miles this week. But with IoT devices, that is changing. So if you are self-insured, if you are looking at wellness programs, consider outsourcing to somebody who is prepared to manage that data. Think about whether you even want to keep any of that data physically on site or physically in your servers from a liability perspective. Mm-hmm. So as we are going to this more connected world, as more and more companies are taking responsibility for wellness programs and self-insurance, this is a huge area where I would say get some help and minimize your risk and do it right.
At the end of the day, too, is as an individual, make sure that you are making decisions that you want about the information that you're sharing. And do understand that anytime something is digital, or if you are using social media, you are moving into celebrity status. Make sure that you're checking what the privacy and the terms of use or terms of service policies are that are on that particular application or tool. And as employers, do pay attention to what your privacy capabilities are. And what I always go back to, it is consent, right?
Yes.
But I also go to relevance. It's purely relevant. Don't share information. There is a little bit of a need to know that you should pay attention to. And I'm just going to ask you one thing. If you had one bit of advice that you would give an employer, what would be that one bit of advice?
I think it is embracing privacy as a core competency of your company. Train all employees on privacy, why you do what you do, why you don't do certain thing, what the impact is to your employees, your fellow employees, your customers, should something happen. I think that just a lot of people don't know, and as you have multiple generations that look at digital differently, get everybody on the same page, then you get that culture of respect.
Fantastic. And by the way, I would encourage you to include these policies in your employee manual and consider addressing what Liz just said in your orientation. Well, you guys, thank you for joining us for our two-part series on privacy in the workplace. Higher Results, we air every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Mountain Time on Facebook. And you can find us at facebook.com/Higher Results. If you miss a show, we have so many great shows on i2iworkforce.com/Higher-Results. Until next Tuesday, we'll see you online, and thanks so much for being here. And thank you, Liz, for being here.
Thank you for having me.